Well, God is all about rewriting the scripts that have been written in our lives. And whether you're somebody who comes from a straight as an arrow past or somebody who comes from a long and winding road, God is all about rewriting the script of your life. And so that's what we're about as a church as well. Well, let me say that no matter where you're coming from or who you are welcome at Christ Community Church, and a very special welcome at Easter time. So everybody, Happy Easter. Happy Easter. Good to see all of you. I thought it might be fun since this is the 10:45 service, and this is the only time that we have our deaf and sign language community here with us, that maybe I would even surprise them and see if we could learn how to say Happy Easter together. Can we do that? I think we can do that. Happy Easter. Yeah, okay. Happy, this is happy. Easter, this is Easter. Jim told me that this is Easter. That's good morning. Good morning, okay. So teach us again because we need to hear from you. Happy Easter. All right, let's give it up for our sign language deaf community here. Yeah, all right. It's good to be able to learn together, isn't it? All right, well, if you're somebody who's new, if it's a brand new experience for you to be, welcome to Christ Community Church. If you haven't been in a while, one of the things that you'll need to know is that we've been heading through the book of Leviticus. Now, if you don't know the Bible that much, Leviticus has the reputation of being the most boring book in the entire Bible. And what we've decided to do is to go through the book of Leviticus because I believe that there are hidden treasures on every page of the Bible. And that God has messages that He's sending to us that you may not understand unless you do a little bit more study in it. So we've got this series that we've been doing. We also have a guide that we've come out with. It's out on the tables if you want to pick one up on your way out. Or if you're online, you can download a PDF related to this. It's got all kinds of helpful study aids that are in there to help you get through the book of Leviticus. And our hope, to be honest, is that you'll come back, bring your guide, take notes, and go through the whole second half of the Leviticus series along with all of us. But for now, go ahead and open your guides to page 12 and 13. And then there's also a visual aid that's on page 15 that will help you to understand a little bit more about what we're talking about today. Now, the book of Leviticus, for those of you who don't know, happens right after the Israelites had been in slavery in Egypt for 400 years. They had just broken out of Egypt, they've gone through the Red Sea, and now God is remaking a community that instead of having a slavery mindset, has a freedom mindset. And instead of following an Egyptian calendar, is now following a brand new calendar. And God is using Levites and priests, offering and feasts, the sacrifice of beasts, and care for the least. I made that up myself. And He's reshaping the community through that. Now, one of the things He's using is a series of feasts or festivals that they practice all year long that help them to remember their past, and without even knowing it, they're looking forward to their future. And the 7 festivals go like this. The first festival is the festival of the Passover, and it remembers the time that the angel of death passed over the homes of everyone in Israel who had the blood of the lamb on their doorposts. It was when they were spared from death. And then you have the Feast of the Unleavened Bread that happened the day after, the feast happened the day after the Feast of the Passover. The third in a row that they had, these 3 went bing, bang, bong, was the Feast of the First Fruits. And that's what we're going to be studying and taking a deeper look at here today. 7 weeks after the Feast of the First Fruits was the Feast of Weeks, or known as Pentecost. It was 7 weeks, or exactly 50 days after the Feast of the First Fruits, so it was known as Pentecost. It also had to do with bringing in the harvest. The fall festivals, these 4 all happened in the spring. The fall festivals started off with Rosh Hashanah, which was their new year. It was the Feast of Trumpets, and it happened as the kickoff to a New Year festival that was 10 days long and culminated in the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur was all about the cleansing of the camp so that God could come and take up residence with his people. We did a full message on this last week. We had a goat that was a live goat that was here on stage, and a memorable line, "The goat has left the building." Yeah, so if you didn't see that, powerful stuff, check that out online. And then the last of the 7 festivals was the Feast of Tabernacles. We're going to zone in on the first 3 of these feasts that happened during the springtime. The first of which was the Passover. Now, when Jesus came into Jerusalem, they had been celebrating the Passover every year in the spring for over 1,000 years. And he came in on the week that they were celebrating the Passover that year. For 1,000 years, they had remembered back to the time that God had saved their lives from the angel of death, and that instead of getting death, they got life and freedom. And that Passover celebration happened all week long, but it had its climax on Friday, when the Passover lamb was slaughtered. You know what else was happening on that Friday? Jesus was getting crucified. The Passover lamb was slaughtered at precisely 3 p.m. on that Friday. And at 3 p.m., Jesus was saying, "It is finished," as he breathed his last. It's as if God was saying, all the way back when I wrote Leviticus, I wanted you to practice and rehearse this idea that there would be a lamb that would be slain to prevent you from experiencing death, so that when it happened for real with my son, you would know that it was here. That was on Friday. On Saturday, they would have had another festival, another feast that they would experience, the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. Now, thinking backwards, they were remembering about when they were in Egypt and they had to escape really, really fast. Now, leaven, or yeast that goes inside of bread, is the agent that makes it rise. And they left so fast from Egypt that they didn't even have time for their bread to rise, so they brought unleavened bread. But it was more than that. The symbol was a symbol of freedom and escape from Egypt. Leaven also became known later on as a symbol for sin and a symbol for pride. And they were eating unleavened bread as a deliverance not just from Egypt, but a deliverance from their sinful captors and the power of sin that was affecting their lives. So you had Friday was the Passover, Saturday was unleavened bread, and it would remind them that we have freedom from death, freedom from slavery, and freedom from sin that was bought on the cross of Jesus. And then it gets one step better. Feast on Friday, feast on Saturday. The next feast was on Sunday. Yeah, 3 in a row. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And this was the Feast of the First Fruits. The Feast of the First Fruits was all about the barley harvest coming in and bringing the first fruits of the barley harvest to the Lord. And you can read about it in Leviticus 23 if you want to open your Bibles and follow along. We'll be at verse 10. If not, I'm going to go ahead and throw it up on the side screens anyway. It says this: "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land that I'm going to give you and reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain you harvest. He is to wave the sheaf before the Lord so that it will be accepted on your behalf. The priest is to wave it on the day after the Sabbath." Note that would be a Sunday. "On the day you wave the sheaf, you must sacrifice as a burnt offering to the Lord a lamb, a year old, without defect. Together with it, a grain offering of 2/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with olive oil, a food offering presented to the Lord, a pleasing aroma, and its drink offering, a quarter of a hin of wine. You must not eat any bread or roasted or new grain until the very day you bring this offering to your God. This is to be a lasting ordinance for the generations to come, wherever you live." Now, did you notice the symbolism that's there in this passage? I hope you were paying attention to that, because the thing that was sacrificed on the day that the barley harvest was brought in was a perfect lamb with no defect. And Jesus himself was known as the perfect lamb, the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world. In addition to the sacrifice of a perfect lamb, there were also two other sacrifices that were made, one of bread and the other one of wine. And what does bread and wine remind you of? It reminds you of the communion meal, right? That represents the body and blood of Jesus that was given on Good Friday. Then the other thing that they did is they took a sheaf of grain. Barley was the first grain to come in, so it would have been a sheaf of barley. And the priest took it and he waved it before the Lord. You may say, what's the significance of taking a barley sheaf from the first part of the harvest? Well, two pieces. One is that it acknowledged to the people that whatever's first comes from the Lord. You might be hungry from a long winter of not having anything had come in. You may be really yearning for bread, but the first part always belongs to the Lord. The other important symbol from that is that the first belongs to the Lord, but there is a huge harvest that's yet to come. The first fruits implies that there are many, many, many more fruits that are yet to come in the harvest. So we need to be thinking that all the way back in the book of Leviticus, God was thinking ahead. What was he thinking ahead to? He was thinking ahead to the resurrection of Jesus. He thought this first fruits festival is symbolic of something bigger, because when Jesus rose from the dead, he himself was the first fruits of a bigger resurrection. He was the first one that belonged to the Lord, but there is going to become a harvest of many, many thousands, many millions, even billions of people that would resurrect from the dead along with Jesus because they trusted in Jesus. You see, God was thinking about the resurrection all along. Now, you may think that I just made this one up, and that it was just something that, Mark thought of because he's trying to put Easter together with first fruits, and it's kind of a stretch, but it's not really the case. Paul, the apostle, is the first one who we know talked about this idea, connecting these two ideas together. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, he says, "But Christ has indeed been raised from the dead." The what? The first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. "For since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead also came through a man. For as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive, but each in turn. Christ, the what? The first fruits. Then when he comes, those who belong to him." Jesus is the first of those being raised from the dead, because when Jesus rose from the dead, he rose from the dead as a way to express that more people can be raised from the dead. He broke the death barrier so that you and I can break the death barrier. So that when we live, we don't live as people who are hopeless, we live as people with hope. We don't live as people who are aimless, we live as people with purpose. So that when we lose a loved one, we know that they have gone to a place where they are experiencing resurrection power, and we don't grieve for them because we know where they are. They would never want to come back to this dingy, dirty place ever again. And this is good news, amen? Amen. See, God was thinking ahead of the first fruits of the resurrection, but it's even bigger than that, because when Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead, he was the first fruits that was thinking of you. God was thinking of you. When Jesus was going through all the beatings, when Jesus was having nails driven through his hand, when that crown of thorns was wrenched on his head, when the whip was being drawn across his back, you might ask, what was it that kept him going in those very hard times? Why didn't he just call down that legion of angels to put the hurt on everybody who was putting the hurt on him? He kept going because he was thinking of you. He was thinking of you all the way back when he was on the cross. That person after person flashed into his mind, people that he loved, and he endured the pain because there were so many that he loved. And these were real people with real names, like Chad, or Aaron, or Tara, or Ron. All with real stories that God was thinking about them. In fact, we captured one of these stories, the story of Ron, that will help us understand exactly how God was thinking of Ron. Check this out.
God was thinking of me when I was an atheist in a foxhole. All the flying bullets, explosions, and parachute jumps didn't open my eyes. 10 years of beating up my body and soul didn't show me what God had in store. Growing up, there really wasn't religion, so to speak, in the household. When I was about 13, I started to kind of investigate it for myself, thought about it. For me, that didn't make sense. And at that point, I really started to consider myself an atheist. I made the decision when I was about 17, my senior year of high school, that I wanted to join the military. I wanted to be a paratrooper. That was my sole goal when I first went in. When I got out of the military, I moved to Cheyenne, Wyoming, because that's where I'd gotten divorced, and that's where I needed to be in order to fight for custody of my sons.
Ron and I were introduced by a fellow co-worker.
We dated for 5 years before we ever got married. We never moved into it together, and that was something in Sherry's faith. Sherry had become a Christian.
From the moment that God showed up in my life, I knew that I'd been forgiven, and He took my life, which was a train wreck, and He brought me back to life.
So when we got here to Omaha, my boss at the time, again, him and his wife and kids, they attended Christ Community, and our first Christmas here, they actually invited Sherry to the Christmas service. And, well, they invited both of us, but my boss kind of knew that I probably wasn't going to show up. She was a little apprehensive when she first showed up at the size of the church, but she quickly came to realize that even though it was a big church, she was noticed and she was welcomed. I would come with Sherry on occasions. I just didn't feel like I was really getting anything out of it, but I did feel a sense of community, a sense of everybody belonging, and it was a warm feeling.
April 10th, 2014 at 2 o'clock in the morning.
By the time we woke up, the entire outside wall of the kitchen on our upper deck was completely engulfed. I climbed up the ladder to the upper deck on the outside with a garden hose, came across the deck. I didn't have to open the door because the glass from it had melted out. So I just stepped through the patio door into the kitchen with the garden hose and was trying to spray water up in the ceiling. A ceiling fan above me that was on fire fell, glanced off of my left shoulder, hit the floor. About that time, we finally heard that the fire department was there. The funny thing was this whole time, all I had on was a pair of pajama bottoms. I was completely barefoot, I had no shirt on, but I walked out without a scratch. Sherry had reached out to Pastor Paul Gedden.
Paul came and walked through the house with us, and then went over to the hotel, and he prayed with us.
I think it was the first time that I really heard a prayer that impacted me.
And that's when it says, do you think the Holy Spirit was stirring in your soul? And it wasn't one of those, oh, Sherry, not this again. It was like kind of a acknowledgement.
Following Sunday, we came to church. It happened to be a day of communion. And as the elements were passed around, I just instinctively took the elements. I sat there looking at it while Mark prayed for communion, and I took the elements. And the whole time, Sherry's kind of watching me. And afterwards, she's like, do you realize what you just did? I said, yeah, I think I do. She goes, is there something you want to tell me? Are you ready to take that next step? Have you accepted Christ? And I said, yeah, I think I have. She led me to Christ that exact day. The following Sunday was Easter. And the theme that Easter was crossing the line. They asked everybody who was ready to give their lives to Christ to come up, cross the line, and write their name on the stage with a piece of chalk. And I got up and I did that Easter. Even when I was at my point of there's no such thing as God, it just doesn't exist, there's nothing more after this, I fully believe that he was there. I know he was standing next to me in the room with the bullet in the back of the helmet. I know he was standing next to me there in the elephant grass in Panama. I know he was there with me disarming an RPG in Saudi Arabia or Iraq at the time. I know he was there with me in Mogadishu, Somalia, as I was moving through the streets under fire. I know he was there. I may not be able to convince you that God's thinking of you. I may not be able to prove it to you, but when you know, you're gonna know. I honestly don't know any other way to put it. God's there, and when you're ready, he's gonna let you know he's there.
God was thinking about Ron in the foxhole and in the fire, and when he found a girlfriend in Wyoming, and when he was right here on Easter service that morning. My story is a lot different than Ron's story, but God was thinking about me as well. One of the things that I have common in Ron, I've never been in a foxhole, I've never been in a fire, never gotten a girlfriend from Wyoming either. But I did get intellectually skeptical about the faith, just like Ron did at right about 13 years old. I grew up in a religious family, but I considered myself to be a little bit more scientifically minded, a little more intellectual, skeptical, strategic, logical. And because of this, I heard stories about arks and talking snakes and people rising from the dead, and I said to myself, this is just not plausible. So I walked away from God, but I'm so glad that God did not walk away from me. God was thinking about me when he put me in this tiny little youth group with a volunteer youth group leader by the name of Jeff Tucker. And Jeff Tucker was cool because he was old and he still really liked high school students. I mean, he was like 20 years old and still could relate to high school students. Jeff was cool because he carried a big fat Bible called the Ryrie Study Bible. Jeff was cool because he drove a green Datsun B210 that we called the Froggermobile. Jeff was cool because he played a game with us that he called Stump the Chump. And it was a chance to ask all of the questions that you want about God or science or the Bible or faith, and he would unflinchingly, without criticizing us, answer the questions that we had to the best of his knowledge. I needed that when I was in high school. God was thinking about me when he sent me to a secular university where I could go to school and take classes on Islam and Buddhism and Judaism and Hinduism from people who actually believed those religions. And I could compare Buddha and Krishna and Muhammad and Moses to Jesus and say, how does Jesus line up against the pantheon of world religion leaders, and find out for myself that Jesus just beats the tunic off of all of them. In fact, Jesus' claims were bigger than any of their claims. Jesus' miracles were more credible than any of their miracles. Jesus' death on the cross was more famous and transformative, and Jesus was the only one out of all of them to die and raise from the dead. Every other religion leader died and stayed in the ground, but Jesus rose from the tomb victorious. God was thinking of me when he put me in a place where I could learn that for myself. God was thinking of me when he put me in a Christian group in college called InterVarsity, where multiple people had advanced degrees and they all read big fat books so that when I brought my questions to them, they could give me big books to answer those questions. And God was thinking of me when he put me on a dorm that was filled with people who were spiritual skeptics, and they started asking me questions about my spiritual journey, and we started playing a game together called Stump the Chump. Only this time, I was the chump, answering spiritual questions. I found that all that time, even though my life was not marked with danger or tragedy, God was still thinking of me on a very different kind of spiritual journey. And that as tragedy struck my life later on, multiple miscarriages, my parents' divorce, sitting in the hospital with more people than I can count, Kelly getting a brain tumor. I found that in all of those moments, God drew close to me and showed me more about his presence and his reality. Now, your story is not the same as Ron's story, and your story is not the same as my story. It's been custom designed by God, but one thing we all have in common is that God was thinking of you. He was thinking of you in your brightest days and your darkest hours. He was thinking about you when you laid on the floor sobbing that one day, and he wrapped his arms around you. He was thinking about you when you were so anxious you felt like there was a weight on your chest and you didn't even know if you could breathe. God was thinking of you when you got that letter in the mail that said, "You're in, you made it," and he celebrated with you. God was thinking about you when you were comparing yourself to other people and you felt about this big. God came through and said, "You matter to me." God was thinking about you just by bringing you to these Easter services here today. Just like Ron, it may be a chance for you to have a dramatic rewrite of your life script. That maybe some crazy family member or wacky neighbor invited you to come to Easter and you're like, "I don't even know what I'm doing here." I know what you're doing here. God is thinking about you. And he wants you to hear this message of resurrection life. He does. You know, God thinks about us like I think about my 4 kids. I have 4 kids. A couple of them aren't even in state anymore, but I think about them all the time. I pray for them every day. I strategize about how to help them do better things in their lives. My oldest son is in Lexington, Kentucky now, and he is an entrepreneur who buys and sells video games and video game systems on eBay and Amazon and makes a living doing it. And then he gets on YouTube and teaches people how to buy and sell video games, and 30,000 people have subscribed to his channel. Isn't that amazing? Like if he was 3 years old and he came up to me and said, "Dad, when I grow up, I'm gonna be a YouTuber," I would have said to him, "What's a YouTuber?" This is stuff that's getting invented as we go along. I love thinking about my daughter, number 2. She's in Atlanta, Georgia right now doing campus ministry, just like her mom. And she's caring for people in the middle of the pandemic who are dealing with depression and anxiety and suicide and isolation and loneliness. And she's bringing gospel good news to college students in Athens, Georgia. I love talking ministry and theology with her. And I love it every time my 3rd son comes out of the garage with a brand new project that he's been woodworking on and shows it off. "Look what I made." There's powerful artistic power in that kid. And I love thinking about my 4th, who's still in high school, but she speaks 3 languages. She's researching colleges, and next week we get to go off and visit some of the colleges that she's interested in. I think about these kids all the time. And I've just got a tiny brain and I'm a limited human person. If I think about my kids like that, how much more does the God of the universe with infinite thought power and infinite love think about his kids? How much is God thinking about you these days? All the way back from resurrection time until now, God was thinking about you. But I want you to know something, that you are not the end game of what God has been thinking about. In fact, you are also the first fruits of something else that God has been planning from the foundation of the world. James talks about this in James chapter 1, verse 18, where it says, "He chose to give us birth through the word of truth that we might be a kind of what? A kind of first fruits of all he created." In other words, human beings are being redeemed not as the final chapter of what God is doing, but God is also going to be redeeming all of creation. Everything that he made is going to be recycled, redeployed, remade for his goodness, and in his image. So think about this. You go all the way back to the beginning. God was in Leviticus, and he was already pre-thinking about the resurrection. And at the resurrection, he was pre-thinking about you. And while he's redeeming you, he's pre-thinking about redeeming all of creation. Is that not a cool idea of God? He put it all together. God was thinking about you all along. But the spotlight has to come back to you this morning. Because resurrection power is not only given to everyone in the world automatically. Resurrection power and the ability to raise from the dead is only given to those who say, I place my faith in Jesus. And I trust in his resurrection power to raise me from the dead as well. So I wanted to give you an opportunity this morning to have that transitional moment, to experience that moment of faith where you say, I hereby place my faith in Jesus. I believe in God. And you need to know that before you ever believed in God, God believed in you. God saw potential in you. God wanted to claim you to be a part of his family. Jesus did this all the time when he was walking around the planet. He would come up to Matthew, the tax collector, and he would say, Matthew, everybody else hates you, but I want you to follow me. In other words, he's saying to Matthew, I believe in you. He would go up the street or up the coast to the Sea of Galilee, where he would find a couple of fishermen, James and John, out fishing. He would point to them and say, hey guys, drop your nets and follow me. In other words, he's saying to them, I believe in you. I believe that you can be more than fishermen, that you can be fishers of men. And he would go up the coast to Tyre and Sidon, some of the most hated cities where nothing good happened, and come face to face with one of the most marginalized people called the Syrophoenician woman. And he would look her in the eye and say to her, I've never seen faith like this in all of Israel. In other words, he says, I believe in you. No matter how cool you are, no matter how marginalized you feel, no matter what your age or background, God is saying to you today, I believe in you. And I've got this plan to change the world, and it happens through resurrection power, and I want you to be a part of my world-changing plan. Will you trust me? Will you trust me? Now, everybody trusts God at some moment in their life. And this morning, I'm going to pray a prayer of faith. And the prayer of faith is not a magical formula. It's just a way of communicating to God to mark the moment to say, today, right here, right now, I'm going to trust in you. And my prayer of faith will be pretty simple. It'll have two parts. I believe you were thinking of me when you died on the cross. And I needed that in order for the cross to crush death in my life. And I believe that you were thinking about me when you rose from the dead, and that gives me resurrection power as well to be with you for all eternity and to live with power in this lifetime. And I'm going to invite you all to pray that prayer if you want to say yes to Jesus and be a part of his harvest that raises from the dead after we die. But I want to give you a warning before I do that. And that is that when Jesus called people, he invited them publicly and boldly. He didn't invite them just to sit in a corner and pray a prayer and not tell anybody about it. No, he says, Matthew, follow me. James and John, follow me. Syrophoenician woman, follow me. And they did it publicly. They placed their faith in him, and everybody around them knew it. So on Easter Sundays, I like to have some kind of a symbol that helps people to not just pray a prayer, but to be public about their faith. It might be planting a flag and a cross, or having people cross over the stage and write their name on the stage as a symbol that they've crossed over from death to life. But I love for it to be public. This year, though, we aren't going to do a stage thing because we have so many friends who are joining us at home due to COVID, and so many people that, going on the stage might not be appropriate at this point. So instead of that, what we're going to do is we're going to invite you to send in a picture of yourself. You can take a selfie or send a regular picture that you've already got on your phone, but we'll flash up a number on the screen, and through the wonders of technology, when you text it in, your face will show up on the screen behind me, and we can all celebrate the faces of the people who are saying yes to Jesus. So it's kind of a two-part deal. I'm inviting you to pray a prayer of faith and also to say yes, or to be bold about your yes by sending in a picture. So everybody here in the room, I want to invite you to stand right now as we pray. If you're at home, I want to invite you to stand as well. And we're going to pray together this bold prayer of faith. And then for those who say yes to Jesus, I'm going to invite you to send in your picture. Would you bow your heads here in the room, and those of you who are at home as well? You know, in moments like this, there's oftentimes a battle that rages in your mind. And I want you to know that's real, and it's a spiritual battle. You might be hearing a voice that says, ooh, if I say yes and snap the selfie, the person sitting next to me is going to know. Or if I have my face on that screen, the whole world may know. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that level of exposure. I want you to know, if that's the voice that you're hearing right now, this is not the voice of God. But if you're hearing in your head, I love you, you matter to me, I died for you, I want you on Team Resurrection, that's the voice of God that's speaking to you right now. So I want to ask you to pray this prayer of faith along with me that acknowledges you believe that God was thinking of you. This is the prayer. I'll say it out loud. You can just follow along silently in your mind as I pray. Dear Jesus, I believe that you were thinking of me. When you died on the cross, that death was so that I might avoid the death penalty myself. I might be able to have sin crushed in my life and be forgiven of everything. And Jesus, I believe today that you were thinking about me when you rose from the dead. That you were the first fruits, and you want me to be a part of the broader harvest. Today I acknowledge that I trust you. I want to follow you. And I pray that you'll give me the strength from this day forward to live for you. And I pray this in the mighty name of Jesus, the one who conquered death, the one who rose from the grave, and all God's people said, amen, amen. Now, if you prayed that prayer, and if you were sincere, if you really meant it deep into your soul, the Bible says a divine transaction has taken place, and you've crossed over from death to life. From being destined of being separated from God to being in the arms and in the family of God. And here on planet Earth, you get a brand new family that's called the church. So, church, the brand new family, let's welcome our new brothers and sisters who have said yes to Jesus and trusted in him for the first time in their life. That their whole eternal trajectory has been changed. We love you guys, and we want to let you know you are welcome in the family of God. Now it's time to be bold. We're going to go ahead and put that phone number up on the screen. And if you're somebody who wants to send in a selfie, you can go ahead and click that selfie at home or here in the room. Send it in. We'll put it on the screen. We've already seen a load of people do this in other services. I think that God is at work in this service just as much as he's been working in our 4 other services. If you say, I'm looking kind of raunchy right now because I'm actually at home in my jammies and not at church, and I want to send in a better picture of me, like a glamour shot or something, I want you to know that's just fine. You send in whatever picture of you that you want to send in. Some of you want to send in a picture of your dog right now. And I want you to know, do not send in a picture of your dog. We have screeners here who are going to screen out the picture of your dog so it's not going to make it on the screen anyway. Maybe you're old and you're saying, if I'm an old dude, is it too late for me to say yes to Jesus and send in my picture? The answer is no way. It's never too late to say yes to Jesus. Or maybe you're a kid and you go, is it okay if I send my picture in? And the truth is, some of the most important expressions of faith happen by kids saying yes to Jesus on Easter morning. So if you're a kid and you genuinely prayed that prayer, just say to Mom or Dad, can we take a picture of me and send it in, and then send it in here, and we will celebrate the pictures of the people who come in as we sing our final 2 songs. So go ahead and send your pictures in. We'll ramp up the band.